If you've played Hella Loose for any amount of time, you will have realized that the M1 Garand is substantially better than the German Kar 98. In fact, in a recent video I did ranking every infantry weapon, I placed the Garand at the very top and ranked the Kar as the single worst gun in the entire game. These two rifles are at opposite ends of the spectrum. The Garand has the lowest bullet drop in the entire game, a great controllable rate of fire, and an 8-round magazine that is very quick to reload. The Kar has a slightly more significant bullet drop, although it's not too bad, but it also has the slowest fire rate, the smallest bullet capacity, which at 5 bullets is almost half that of the Garand, and a painfully slow reload animation if you don't fire every shot before reloading. So you might be wondering how this affects the in-game balance. Well, the answer is quite a lot. In a recent post in the Hella Loose subreddit, Seedup, who's a friend of mine that you might recognize from some other videos, made a detailed post on the results of every competitive match that he could find from August 3rd onwards. Yes, a lot of people aren't aware, but there is a competitive scene in Hella Loose. It's actually quite active. In any case, he didn't include matches that were either practices or scrims where teams might not be playing their best. What he found is that out of 26 matches, the Allied team won 21 times. That is a win rate of 80%, which is insane. You have to keep in mind that these are 50v50 matches being played at the highest level of the game, between a variety of different teams, some of which are obviously better than others, and yet the best way you can have at predicting who is going to win isn't who has the best shooters, or tankers, or tactics, or which team has been around the longest. It really just comes down to who is playing Allied. So there's good news and bad news. Bad news is the teams are unbalanced. The good news is that we have a direct response from the devs in regard to this topic. But before I get onto that, let me explain precisely what the balance problems are and how this affects public matches. In order to do this, I talked to several of the best players in the competitive scene, gathered some thoughts and opinions, to which I will add my own. First, you need to understand two problems. One is team balance, and the other is the offensive versus defensive balance. Let's go over the first topic. The Allies, or rather the US, has a significant and clear advantage over the German team, which doesn't just come down to the Garand being better than the Kar. The American kits are straight up better, with more of them having semi-auto or full-auto weapons, over the Germans basically defaulting to the Kar for basically everything except for the most offensive kits. Take the support and engineer kits, for example, which are essential in every match. The US team equips these with the Garand and the M1 carbine, the best and the second best rifles in the entire game. In the German team, they get Kar 98s. With the medic, it's the same thing, though it's rarely used in competitive matches. The Sherman 76 tank is also significantly better than the Tiger. This might not be readily apparent to most players, but there are several reasons for this. The 76 bounces more shots due to its angled armor compared to the boxier Tiger, and it also has a better fire rate, with 1 shot every 7 seconds compared to 9 for the Tiger. Not only that, but the 76 is also cheaper, costing only 85 fuel versus 100 that you need for the Tiger. This allows the Allied team to field better, cheaper armor than the Germans. In pub matches, however, all of these differences don't necessarily matter all that much, since having competent squads and, more importantly, squad leaders will have a much greater impact. I'm sure you've all won or lost 3 matches in a row, primarily due to one team having better players. In public matches, all of these advantages that the Allied team has over the Germans don't really matter because there is all sorts of different players playing, in terms of skill, in terms of knowledge, and in terms of commitment to the game, or levels of try-hardiness. As Reddit user AsagiTech pointed out, he's recorded 14 matches with even wins and losses for both teams. And I can tell you from personal experience that I don't have a higher than average win rate when playing the Allies. The truth is, it's not really an issue in public matches. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the current meta, which is the second part of the post. Out of the 26 matches recorded, only 4 of them had the middle point of the map change sides. What this means is that once a team capped the middle point at the start of the game, that front line never changed. Since you can't build garrisons on enemy territory, there is both a spawn point and radar effect disadvantage when attacking versus defending. The defensive team can set up to 10 garrisons on their side plus whatever OPs their squad leaders have placed, versus the attacking team only being able to place their OPs in enemy territory. This enables the defensive team to react to advances very effectively while always having a nearby spawn to fall back to. I don't think I need to explain this point any further, but this essentially results in a very strong defensive position by both teams, which leads to stalemates. Again, this problem overwhelmingly applies to competitive matches and not public matches, since again, individual squads are usually responsible for having any garrisons at all in public matches, and the levels of communication and coordination are much lower. Now, let's get on to the good news, which is the devs' response to this. C-Dub's thread on Reddit received a reply from Max, from the Hell Loose development team, and I think what he said is extremely positive. Let me read you both of the posts he made. I will only read the most relevant parts. If you want to read the full comment, I will link to them below. Before I even finished editing this video, there's been an official dev briefing posted on Steam addressing these issues of balance and the public test environment. I recommend you read them, but I will stick to the comments made on the Reddit thread since they are more concise. Max says, "A lot of our time and effort has been in rapidly expanding content and trying to fix as many issues as possible. Now that many of those are addressed, we're going to be paying special attention to the game balance between the two teams. I can totally recognize from your data that the US currently possesses a big advantage in competitive matches. This isn't intentional, and we're keen to level the playing field in regards to this." Referring to the balance issues, he says, "Some of the ones we've identified are M1 Garand versus Kar 98, general loadouts favoring higher rate of fire weapons for the US, jumbo tanks being cheap and very potent, some German side pushes to specific sectors being very difficult. I'd love to see a specific list on these if possible. I know Westband on Foy is one. Lack of rate of fire weapons on the German side, MG34, MG42, etc. Generally speaking, we're reviewing the balance of all firearms in lieu of introducing better limb-based hitboxes. For example, no one-shot kill with the Garand in the foot, but I'm broadly keen to bring the balance much more into alignment." So basically, what he's saying is that they are aware of the problem, even down to the key points that the players themselves have also identified as problematic. This is great news. But if you're wondering why they haven't already done something about this, let's refer to his second reply. "Now that the meta is somewhat settling, with some significant entries and changes still to come, our focus is turning to continually improving it to sharpen up the competitive end. Striving for better balance between the teams is the first place to do this. We'll then be looking at the quote-unquote take the middle metagame." He then goes on to mention that they want to add a public test environment to facilitate any changes. So the plan going forward is to first balance the teams and then take a look at the meta. I think this is very important and it's a great approach to the problem. Balancing the teams will allow any further analysis about the meta and game mechanics to be made with a much clearer picture, without the interference of an underlying balance problem. Now, if you take a look at the current roadmap, there is no mention of balance changes or ETA for them. But I believe that's the case because it's a content roadmap, not necessarily documenting other updates that we know are coming, like admin cameras and match recording. So I think this is great news for the game and a reassuring fact to anyone worried about balance and the game's direction. There are lately a lot of new players to the game, which can make matches somewhat frustrating at times, but it also helps at mitigating the balance issues in public matches. This is a time when the most veteran players need to play and welcome and teach new players about the game mechanics. The competitive scene is obviously the most affected by this balance issue, which is obviously not ideal, but I think it would be 10 times worse if public matches had this problem. With all the upcoming changes coming, with the overhaul of the support role and engineer roles, the introduction of transport vehicles, bullet penetration, new weapon loadouts, and whatnot, it's safe to say that the state of the game is always evolving. That's the nature of an early access game, which is kinda easy to forget sometimes given how fun the game is and given that most of it works pretty well. Overall, I'm really happy we got some news regarding balance. This is obviously a very touchy subject, and as with pretty much everything, the more transparency, the better. It feels good to know that the devs share the concerns of the player base and value information and feedback. As a closing remark, I will say that some people want real life to inform things like fire rate, armor penetration, recoil, and so on. Of course, this being a semi-realistic World War II game, historical accuracy should be a factor in terms of balance, but a lot of players forget that this is a game. As such, gameplay needs to be fun and balanced regardless of how things were or are in real life. There are plenty of more realistic games out there, and I've said multiple times, I'm in the camp that thinks that Hell Let Loose strikes a really great balance between realism and arcadiness, and I want to see it remain that way. If sticking to historical accuracy can provide a better game, a more fun game, then that would be awesome. But if it doesn't, then I believe at least that gameplay should be the primary focus and not realism. Alright guys, if you have any opinions or thoughts about this topic, please make sure to leave a comment. I think this game is on the right track and hope to see more changes in the future. For now, that will be all. Thank you for watching, and I hope I will catch you in the next one.